Library Literary Chat. Today we have with us Library Director from the Cotuit Library, Jenny Wiley, and Reference Librarian from the Sturgis Library, Marcella Curry. Thank you both so much for being here today. Very excited to have another book talk. We all brought books with us today. Who wants to go first?
I can start if you want me to. So I'm actually going to start with an author that would be considered local, even though he doesn't still live on Cape Cod. He was born in Hyannis. His name is Joe Flanagan. This is his first novel, and it's written in Hyannis, set in Hyannis and Cape Cod in 1957. It's a crime noir, so this is definitely not a mystery for the cozy set, but it is very good. He is the father, the lieutenant in the book's named Bill Warren. He's the father of a developmentally delayed son. And there's a whole bunch of children who are disappearing or turning up murdered, and he's trying to solve the case, but he has a lot of opposition that's going on within the state police that are there. So it's been pretty good. And as his investigation goes on, a lot of past sins and hidden secrets from sort of the underbelly of Cape Cod come out.
Yeah, that does sound interesting.
Yeah, so some read-alikes for him would be, I think it's, let me look at my list here. James Elroy. Oh, yeah, Black Dahlia and Philip Kerr. Both of those, if you like either of them, they would be read-alikes. But it's good so far.
Yeah, sounds interesting to me. Love that it is set in Hyannis.
Yes.
That's pretty cool,
Yes.
and kind of like a local tie for us Cape Codders. What did you bring, Marcella?
Well, I'd heard about this book, The Well-Educated Mind, a guide to the classical education you never had, and we were just talking about reading classics. And what's interesting about it is she has different sections, and the first section is on reading fiction. So I've got a copy of Don Quixote that I'm taking my time with. And what's interesting is she has you read it through once, and the first stage is what? So you get the story. And then she takes you through some exercises to think about why was it written, how was it written, and then the third stage she likes you to get linked up with someone, and she says you could even do that through writing. And there you're going to talk about or think about so what.
Okay.
So it's an interesting exercise for me, and we were talking a little bit about having a reading journal. So for this, at the end of each little section, I write down just one sentence summary of what happened. And one of the things I like about it is if I don't read it for a couple of days, it's really fun. It's like, ooh, you get caught right back up rather than feeling like you're starting all over again.
I feel that way so often in a book,
Yeah.
especially when I'm reading before bed and I fall asleep and you wake up and you're, where was I again? You have to go back a few pages to try and figure it out or refresh your memory. So very interesting that she's sort of guiding readers through some classics. That's really interesting and a different way to look at it, I think.
And the fiction will go right up into the present. So she has some contemporary, which is nice. And then I think there's a section on history. There's a section on poetry. So.
How are you liking Don Quixote?
I'm liking it. I'm amazed at how much I find relates to current times, which really amazes me. There's a section where a young man has died because he pined away for his love, and she appears, and she says, and everyone's almost like boo-hiss to her, and she's like, that's not my responsibility. And I was clear about how I felt. And I thought, wow, that seems very kind of a fresh concept. So
Yeah.
Neat.
Now, the part where you're sharing it with another person, are you looking for someone who has already read Don Quixote, or are you looking online?
So the idea would be, my husband and I both got copies of it, but the idea would be you'd find someone, you'd both read it, you'd both go through some of these other exercises, and then the third part is to have some dialogue back and forth.
Cool.
And so I thought that was
That's a
interesting.
great idea.
And I'm not sure, do we want to try and do something at the library with that? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, neat. That'll be
we'll go
interesting.
with
You'll
that.
have to keep us updated
Okay.
and let me know if you guys start that at the Sturgis Library. So neat. Well, I brought with me today, this was a really fun book, kind of speaking on the local, like you were saying, that's tied to Hyannis. This is actually set on an island off of Cape Cod, but it's called Alice Island, so they changed the name. It is not Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket, but it's a very cute book. I think readers would really like it because there's a lot of book quotes in it. They talk a lot about books. The gentleman, one of the main characters, owns a bookshop on the island. And then there's basically character-driven plots about what's happening to all the people involved and what are their backstories. And so I found it a very quick, easy, entertaining read that was charming. I felt it was very charming.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about a cookbook. I don't know about you, but even when I don't cook out of the cookbook, I like to read it. I like to read it, and I love to look at the pictures of what's going on. But the added benefit of this cookbook, it's called Soup for Syria, and it was collected by Barbara Abdeni Masad. And it's a collection of recipes from all kinds of famous chefs and cookbook authors from around the world. Everybody from Anthony Bourdain to Mark Bittman to Alice Waters. And all the proceeds from the book go to help feed Syrian refugees. And not only is it beautiful, it's a beautifully done book. She also went into the refugee camps, and so she took pictures of people who were refugees. And so the photography is phenomenal. She captures the people that are there so brilliantly, but then the pictures of the food are awfully darn good too.
So it's a little bit more than a cookbook. It's
It
also
is.
something that will make you reflect on current events.
It is.
And actually, in some ways, do some good.
Yeah, and all the recipes are easy to make, and it's all stuff you can find in the grocery store, which is one of the things sometimes I come up against when I'm looking at the celebrity chefs is where am I supposed to find this one
Or what
root?
is this?
Yeah.
What is this, and where do I find it? Yes. Well, thank you for that. What else did you bring with you today, Marcella?
Well, a similar book in that it's about gardening and really about gardening, but about a home. It was a young woman, 66 square feet. I love the book itself and the photography. And she had an apartment in New York City, and she had 66 square feet, and what she does with it is amazing. So it's just really fun to see. And she's also a forager, and she loves to get out and in the city and find what's out there. And so she has serviceberry pie recipe, which are apparently you can just get out there and find in the park. So she has a blog. She's actually from this apartment. She's moved 2 apartments now, but she continues to write about what she's doing, and she's a lot of fun. And it's just beautiful.
It does look very pretty, and imagining what it would be like to only have 66 square feet. Pretty incredible. We could all use some tips about saving space, I'm sure. The other book I brought with me, this is kind of a classic. Ken Follett is, as we all know, a great author. So it was published, I think, in the 90s, a long time ago. But I think this is one that would be good to revisit because this is just a very juicy, fast-paced, character-driven novel. It's historical about the 1800s banking in England.
Oh, wow.
Yes, very interesting, very intriguing, and like I said, it's one of those page turners you can't put down. So definitely, if you're in the mood for something fast-paced, this is a great fit for that.
If you're looking for a new series to begin, this is a fabulous mystery series. It's written by Priscilla Royal. She lives out on the West Coast. And it is all set in medieval mysteries. So it follows a prioress named Elizabeth and a brother named Thomas, and they both sort of run the priory together. She's in charge, which at the time period in the 1200s was quite remarkable. And it is based on a specific space, but it did have female prioresses. And each of the books is a different murder that either drops into their lap or come upon, which sometimes I find those to be bothersome after a while, that someone would have this many bad things happen all the time. And yet I don't have that response to this. We argue about when this book comes in, which of us at the library is going to get to take it out first. She's cultivated quite a group of fans, and there's probably about 10 or 12 books in the series. They're not obviously horribly long, so it's a nice little weekend read if you need to just pass some time, or if you're not feeling well and you want to read something but it's not going to weigh 10 pounds while you're holding it. So this is a good choice.
Love it, because sometimes you do need something that isn't going to take as much time, or as I say, sometimes I can't remember who talked about it last time, but after you finish a book, how there's sort of a downtime and you don't know what to read. So I think it's a good transition to maybe pick something a little shorter, faster paced that's a little easier to get through.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this girl reading that I brought is kind of similar to that, because it starts in the year 1333 and goes into the year 2060. And the connecting theme between each of the little stories is that there's a artwork, whether it's a photograph or a painting of a woman reading. And so it's almost like a kaleidoscope, like up you're in 1333 and you hear about this person and what's going on, and then zoop, it changes. So it's one of those where you could kind of pick it up and put it down. And I had read it a while ago, but it's, one of my favorites. So I thought, oh, kind of rose to the top this time when I thought about bringing something.
I love that, and that's what I did too. I sort of tried to go back with my picks today, pick some things that I really enjoyed reading, and picks that people may be able to find at the library, which I think is a challenge sometimes. So speaking of libraries, you guys both run book clubs out of your libraries. Those are still going strong, I'm sure.
Yes.
Any tips for anyone out there who might be watching who is interested in starting a book club?
My first tip would be start the one you want to read. Sometimes people will start a book club and they'll think, well, we ought to read this kind of book, or we ought to try and do it this way, and it tends to fizzle out in that way. If you start it with the stuff you like, it will attract other people. So if you're a science fiction writer and you think that no one else wants to be in a science fiction reading club, you're wrong. You just don't know that they're there. If you start it, then people will join it because they're interested in. But if you wanted to start science fiction or fantasy or whatever your interest was in, and instead you started a general book club hoping to put some of those in, I think you're going to end up being disappointed, not as invested.
Yeah, really good advice. Sometimes I think when I meet with my book group, we end up not necessarily even talking about the book, but just other books in general, what we liked. So sometimes I think that they don't have to be so rigid either.
Right.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, ladies, both so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Love the local library literary chat, and hopefully we'll get to sit down again in the near future.
Great.
Thanks.
With me today, Jenny Wiley, the Cotuit Library Director, as well as Marcella Curry, Adult Services Reference Librarian from the Sturgis Library. For Channel 18, I'm Sarah Mantle.